From a highly secure network of top secret locations across South Texas, this is the Spurs Insider. I'm your host, Mike Finger, joined as always by our panel of Express News Spurs beat writers, Tom Orsborn and Jeff McDonald, along with sports editor Nick Talbot, coming at you from the second week of August. We're going to start with one of us was on a pretty big trip across the ocean. And so we might as well start there now. Jeff, how was Ireland?
It was great. It was really great. Good trip.
Yeah.
Good trip.
Any basketball there?
Not a lot. I was going to say not a lot of basketball there. They were big into there was an Irish boxer they were all into. So
an Irish boxer.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad you had some time. Did you watch any? Were you able to see any Olympic basketball from Ireland?
I didn't really get to watch a lot of it until I got back, but I saw the good parts. I saw the first game I got to finally settle down and watch was the Serbia game, which ended up being pretty good. And then of course the gold medal game. I got to watch that. Got to see Wemby running around out there. It was good. It was good to be back home and with access to Peacock.
I didn't get to see a lot of Peacock, but I was there in Paris, in Lille. Did you cover the breakdancing? I did not get to the breakdancing. I got over to Taekwondo. I got over to beach volleyball. One of the more, like right up there with the AT&T Center is one of the most fabulously magnificent venues I've ever covered a sporting event in my life. Eiffel Tower Stadium, AT&T Center, like it's hard to pick. You flip a coin. But pretty impressive.
Disingenuous.
That might be slightly disingenuous.
How was the? I'll make the joke. How was the Wi-Fi?
The Wi-Fi at Eiffel Tower Stadium slightly better than AT&T Center, or I guess now Frostbank Center. Sorry, showing my age. At least I didn't call it SBC Center. It was. We're recording this on Tuesday. Still not quite back on South Texas time. Little bit of jet lag taking hold. So forgive us if this podcast is a bit delirious. But what a few weeks for Victor Wembanyama, the San Antonio Spurs. He did not have the most spectacular 6-game stretch of his life. Like there were moments in there when he was struggling a bit. Listen, we judge him by a pretty high standard. He was the best player on his team for the whole Olympiad and was contributing on the defensive end, rebounding, all that stuff for most of the Olympics, but really struggling with his shot there, especially in the middle part of the Olympics, but had his best game of the tournament against the best players. And Tom, you can speak to this. I mean, that's what we've seen from Victor his whole career. I know he's only 20 years old, but he's the type of guy who lives up to the big moments and really look like himself, what we expect from him against Kevin Durant and LeBron James and Steph Curry, even though the French didn't pull it out in the end.
Yeah, they should have switched him on his Steph there at the end, but no, he was, the scoring wasn't as spectacular as we've grown used to, but he did all the other things that we've grown accustomed to, the rebounding, the great defensive plays, and that show of emotion after the game, man. That's those shows of emotion from Wemby have become just as memorable as the things that he does on the court. I mean, it's really, really neat how much he cares and how much he puts into it.
The amount of pressure that he was under, and look, it's sports pressure. It's not. I don't want to compare this to any the pressure that people deal with all the time, but sports pressure that he was under for the entire last month is just sort of unfathomable to me. Like the 20-year-old guy in his home country expected to be the best player on his team, and like I was in France for 19 days. The people there expected to beat Team USA. Like that's what they wanted to do. They thought this was going to be this crowning moment of French basketball, and to ask one rookie of the year to kind of carry that team against a team of a dozen All-Stars, 10 All-Stars, and 4 former MVPs, and count the number of future Hall of Famers. It's completely unrealistic, and yet there Le Bleu was right there at the end of that game, like they had a chance, and due in no small part to Victor Wembanyama, and a lot of it, like he got more help than maybe some people expected from the EuroLeague type guys. Like they were really fun to watch, the rest of that French team for a lot of the Olympics. And like Tom said, just the show of emotion at the end. I think that was just the weeks of expectations and pressure, and realizing that he came so close to pulling off what would have been an all-time feat, winning gold against one of the greatest Team USA rosters ever in terms of talent, and doing that in the city where he grew up. Silver's still pretty awesome, but gold, like that was, I think that was just a lot of that pressure. Like I said, the expectations finally pouring out of him there at the end.
Well, then he was there the next. He was there the next day, on Sunday, to root on the women and talk about a gut-wrenching loss. Man,
yeah. The women almost pulled off an even bigger upset.
Holy cow!
On the line, that was wild.
Yeah.
2 things about Wemby and the Olympic experience. Number one, like I think the French are going to have their day.
Yeah,
at some point. Like if you flash forward 4 years and Wemby's 4 years older, and all those guys on the Team USA team that were kind of responsible for pulling it out are going to be 4 years older and probably not on the team. I mean, that's going to be a Team USA. I think that's going to be in a little bit of flux. Yeah. Wemby's going to have his shot again in 2028 in LA.
Yeah.
The other thing, I think his whole Olympic experience, and especially the way he performed in the pressure of that gold medal game, I think it just shows where he's at heading into his second NBA season. Like he's already taken a leap this summer that really began at the end of last season. But he's out there with, as you said, one of the greatest Team USA's ever assembled, 12, 13 All-Stars, whatever it was.
There were not 13.
Whatever it was. Guys. That was a boy howdy. That was a game that Wemby played in the gold medal game, just from start to finish. To me it just shows he's ready for takeoff. Like his second NBA season is going to start here in a few months, and he's going to be right there in the thick of the best players in the league. And I know that sounds crazy because he kind of was last year. He was the unanimous Rookie of the Year, but I see him already being like another tier up, even as we start the next season.
And as Mike and I talked last time we did the show, you pair him with Chris Paul. Yeah, it's gonna be fun to watch.
Lob City.
He's probably going to be Defensive Player of the Year over that bench scrub, Rudy Gobert.
That was fast. Before I've got several reactions to what Jeff and Tom and Nick just said, but I want to make a note here to our producer, our great, fine, spectacular producer, Monty Bach, who's always looking for titles of the episode to put out there in all the places you can listen to the episode. I think Jeff gave us one. He said, "Boy howdy, that was a game Wemby played." I think that should be the title of this episode. Boy howdy, that's going to get us the YouTube hits, the Spotify clicks, all that stuff. Boy sounds howdy, that was a game Wemby played.
Sounds like something like Beaver Cleaver would say.
We had a sports copy editor named Larry Going. Shout out to Larry Going, who said "boy howdy" quite a bit. So it's a phrase I'm familiar with, but I never heard it come out of Jeff's mouth.
Yeah, it's a little known Irish thing. It would rubbed off me in Ireland. They say "boy howdy" a lot. No, they don't.
Barneystown.
God, I'm going to go back to, because you guys, as expected, made
salient points, didn't we?
You made salient points. Tom mentions the Rudy Gobert thing, which is one of the most amazing.
Oh, wait a minute. Jeff mentioned that.
No, I thought you talked about that bench scrub, Rudy Gobert.
Jeff did.
That was Nick. That was Nick.
That
was Nick.
Sorry, Nick.
It's all right.
Rudy,
Mike's just a little bit hungover from all this travel.
Yeah. Rudy Gobert, and we're going to talk a lot about Victor later. I've got a lot of Victor reaction, but Rudy Gobert was sort of atrocious in the Olympics early on. Like sure, he's a good defensive player, great. But it was just a problem. And this goes back, I think Tom and I might have discussed this when Jeff was in Ireland and I was in Paris 2 weeks ago. I was in Lille at the time, about how the French team, and Vincent Collet was one of my favorite people now after spending some time with them, the head coach of the French team. They were learning what Greg Popovich and the Spurs did early last season, which is that things go a lot better when Victor Wembanyama is playing 5 instead of 4. And they started the Olympics partly because of the egos involved, and you want to give respect to guys who've been part of the French program forever, like Rudy Gobert was, and the reigning defensive NBA player of the year. They had Gobert starting at center and Victor at 4, and it was just a mess. So they had to, at some point, make that adjustment of sending Rudy to the bench. They did that when the tournament moved to Paris for the medal rounds in a pretty big game against Canada, which I thought there was a great chance the French would lose because Canada's loaded with NBA talent. Canada has more NBA talent than the French team did. There's this weird thing after the game in the mix zone area where Rudy Gobert comes out and he has like his fingers taped, 2 fingers taped together. And he claims that he had surgery the night before. And he specifically used the word surgery. And Evan Fournier said the same thing, like kind of covering for Rudy, saying that, Rudy, because the questions were about Rudy being sent to the bench. And so we have a couple of players saying Rudy had surgery the day before, which seems odd. Like, if you had surgery the day before, does that mean that you can come off the bench for 7 minutes but not play 20? It didn't make a whole lot of sense. And then Vincent Collet comes out, and we ask him about the surgery, and he says, no, Rudy did not have surgery. Like, he'd hurt his finger yesterday, and he had an MRI, but I moved Rudy to the bench because I wanted Victor to play the 5. And I just never... those of us on this podcast have covered a lot of sports and a lot of basketball, and I've never seen a situation like that where any player, let alone a player like Rudy, who's pretty established, a veteran guy, he's looking for kind of a way out to save his ego, and the coach doesn't give it to him. I thought it was staggering. It was amazing. I loved it.
A lot of misinformation out there. Yeah.
But it wasn't misinformation. It was Rudy trying to cover himself and saying, I didn't really get benched. And the coach saying, no, you were actually benched.
Right.
I thought that was amazing.
Misinformation.
Anyway, but the French played a lot better with Victor at center and Rudy playing much less off the bench. And this just goes back to the ridiculous discussions we had in the season when everybody was up in arms about who the defensive player of the year was. Well, the defensive player of the year became the French team's 3rd string center, while the runner-up was a starter. That was pretty wild.
The other thing, it kind of goes back to discussions we had early in the last NBA season, is it took the Spurs a little while to find out that Victor should be playing the 5 and not the 4 as well.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. They went through the French went through the same learning process over 2 weeks that the Spurs did in the first 2 months of the season. But
the Polish team wasn't in the Olympics, but I'm wondering, like in the qualifiers, did they start Jeremy Sohan at point guard?
Like Jeremy Sohan might have been an improvement over some of those point guards. The French team struggled in the backcourt. And Jeff, you mentioned earlier about 2028 in LA and how the French are going to be in better position then because Victor's older and because Steph and LeBron and KD are all going to be 40 and may or may not play. The other thing is like the huge prospect in the next draft is Nolan Traore, I believe is how you say his name, who might be the top point guard. And he's French, and he might change that whole team. Not when Victor has Zachary Risache and Alex Sarr join the program, all these recent lottery picks, along with a point guard, like the USA will be tested in LA. USA was tested Saturday at Bercy Arena. along the River Seine in Paris. And Victor, in that game, I want to talk a little bit about the quote after the game. And maybe I'll just tell the story. It's self-indulgent, but the way the whole tournament works, the way the Olympics work, is every player after the game goes through sort of this winding mix zone where there's reporters waiting to speak to them. There's no fining players who don't talk in the NBA, so they don't have to. There's no fining players who don't talk in the Olympics, so they don't have to talk like they do in the NBA. Like Nikola Jokic played 6 games and didn't talk once. He would always say no, thank you. I think Giannis played 4 games and talked only one time, so they don't have to do it. But there's people waiting, massive crowds of media waiting to talk to all these guys. For most of the tournament, you had American reporters, NBA reporters there, who were waiting to talk to Victor, along with the Yahoo from the San Antonio Express News who was there. And so there was a bigger crowd, and he would do questions in French and he would do questions in English. But understandably, after Team France lost to Team USA, like there's all these things are going on at one time. So most of the English reporters are talking to Team USA. Like that makes sense. That they want to talk to LeBron, they want to talk to Steph, they want to talk to KD. So that turned into, as Victor is leaving after the medal ceremony, there's this crush of French reporters, and he goes through about 5 minutes in French, and he might have said outrageous stuff there. I couldn't tell. I've been trying with the Duolingo, but my French just isn't there yet. It's hard. And I'm the only English-speaking reporter there because all the other English-speaking reporters are over talking to Team USA. So Victor's about to walk off, and I can't get in there because things that would bore you. I can't get close. And finally, I yelled out, "S'il vous plaît, Victor," in English. And he saw me and he agreed to give me 2 minutes. He stood there. And the interview is going fine. He's a polite young man, as always. It's great. And I'd mentioned something to him that I'd heard from someone with the Spurs that week about the biggest thing that Victor can take from this is what they call the currency of experience. And, you take whether you win or you lose, you take something from it and you put it in your mental bank to pay off later. And so I mentioned that to Victor. I said, the Spurs talk about the currency of experience. And he nodded his head. And I said, what do you think you got that out of this? And he said, that's something that no one will ever take away from me. I'm learning, and I'm worried about the opponents in a couple of years. And it's just, when you hear something like that, that's how Victor talks. He has this ability to say like the most wildly braggadocious things without it sounding that way. But it was just like, holy cow, what a quote. And I said, do you mean the opponents in FIBA or the NBA? And he said, everywhere. Yeah. And it's just like, that is unbelievable.
And he has genuine concern for them.
He has genuine concern. But if that doesn't sum up just how he thinks, and this, to Tom's point, this is less than a half an hour after he's just bawling on the sidelines, his heart broken by not winning this gold medal. And then to turn around and have that perspective to say, I'm worried about the opponents in a couple of years, and I'm worried about them everywhere. Like on one hand, he's setting himself up to really be ridiculed if he doesn't turn into what he thinks he's going to turn into.
Maybe
because to brag like that, to say stuff like that puts you at risk of letting everybody down. But I guess the point is, one thing you can't say about Victor Wembanyama is he doesn't have high expectations of himself. Like he's setting the bar as high as anybody else is for him.
Maybe in that lengthy post-game on the court chat he had with Kevin Durant, where he did most of the talking. That was interesting.
Yeah,
Kevin was just nodding his head. KD's just nodding his head. Maybe Victor's telling him, retirement, it might be a good thing for you pretty soon.
Kevin is one of the guys who always has really nice things to say about Victor. Like Kevin sees what's coming too. But I think that's what I will take away from this Olympic basketball experience is that's the memory, is the combination of Victor just being completely heartbroken, devastated, crying openly on the sideline, and then turning around and basically defiantly saying, watch out because I'm taking over. And not in 4 years. He said a couple of years.
It's an incredible quote. Yeah.
Anyway, that's something else, man. What did you Jeff? I know you were in some castle or some green expanse, cliffs of Dover during the early part of the Olympics.
Cliffs of Dover in the UK, you rube.
Well, you might have taken a boat. I don't know.
They're called in Ireland. It's the Cliffs of Moher, man.
The Cliffs of Moher.
Not Dover.
Did you go to County Cork?
Get out a little bit. You know.
Did you go to County Cork?
I did.
I think he was at the Tavern of Moher.
Did you see a Galway girl?
I did.
Huh. Did you see the Banshees of Inisherin?
Ed Sheeran?
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, but you saw the end of the you saw the medal rounds of the tournament. I guess you mentioned it earlier, but your Victor takeaway from just how he finished that tournament. How do you think that spins forward to the San Antonio Spurs next year?
Oh, yeah, like I mentioned, I think it's just a tremendous springboard, and I think you covered it pretty well. I'd never heard the term before, but it is a very Spursian term, currency of experience. I think all that is it's just going to propel him into this season. He was already coming into his second NBA season hungry. You know, we know him. We know that he wants to be great. He wants to be the greatest, and he was ready for big things his second year in the NBA. But I do think there's going to be something about losing to all these guys in the gold medal round that is going to inspire him and propel him through the NBA season. I mean, he's going to see Kevin Durant again. He's going to see Steph again. He's going to see LeBron, all those guys. So I think all that is going to be in his mental bank going forward. And it was just a fabulous experience for him to have to perform under that pressure on that stage against that team, to have his best game in the gold medal round. I think it bodes well for when, he's going to go play the Charlotte Hornets or something like that. Like he's going to have some big nights this year against teams that, aren't as good as Team USA was,
Yeah. I was just thinking about this. Another thing that happened, maybe when you were back from Ireland, but when I was in Paris, when Tom was getting things done, holding down the fort here in South Texas, is there was a important deadline that passed related to things we talked about on the podcast before. On August 6th, Lowry Markin of the Utah Jazz did not sign an extension the day he was eligible to do so. If he would have signed it that day, he would have been eligible to be traded on the day of the trade deadline next February. The next day, on August 7th, he signed a huge extension with the Utah Jazz, meaning he will not be eligible to be traded at all this coming season. So we can throw that dream out the window there. There goes that dream, as the guy in the Banshees of Inisherin said. Lowry Markin is not going to be a Spur. Are you heartbroken, Jeff or Tom?
I'm not heartbroken or anything. I mean, he would have been a great fit, but there'll be others to come along for your local Cagers. I do, from hearing from like a lot of the reporters that cover the Jazz, it seems like he's a wonderful young man to cover. So maybe I am a little heartbroken, in that way, that we didn't get a nice little another quotable guy in the locker room. But
it seems like that was the one scenario where Kellin Johnson, somebody like Kellin Johnson might have been traded this offseason. I think now it's pretty safe to say that the roster is what the roster is. Like, I guess there's still time for the Spurs to do some kind of deal. But if there was any question out there as to will Kellin Johnson be back? Will, name your other possibly tradable contract be back? I think that's pretty safe now that the 15 guys on guaranteed deals. The Julian Champagnie.
When you were talking about deadlines, that's what I thought you were referring to. Julian's contract being fully guaranteed.
Yeah, Julian's contract is guaranteed, so they have 15 guaranteed guys under contract. I believe they now have 3 two-way players under contract. Is that right, Tom?
Yes, that is correct. Yes.
Since the last podcast, was it David Duke getting his two-way? Harrison Ingram also got one.
Yes.
So not a whole lot of drama in terms of roster spots in the upcoming training camp.
They added 2 guys for contract for training camp contracts, Malachi Flynn and Brandon Boston, just to make things a little more competitive, I think.
Yeah,
those are 2 NBA players. They'll
be hungry. Yeah.
Later this week, after this podcast reaches your digital players and your eager ears, we're gonna have a official Spurs schedule to talk about. What we already know, Tom, is that jingle bells through Central Park, through the great Madison Square Garden. Your Spurs are going to be playing the Knicks on Christmas morning in New York City. Are you excited about that?
Well, great move by the NBA, pairing one of its most marketable players, young players, the future face of the NBA.
You're talking about Charles Bassey?
Yeah. Victor with the biggest market on the biggest day of the regular season, arguably. Showcase day. It's a great move.
Can I make one prediction about the schedule? Just
fire away.
It might end up blowing him up in my face. But I have a sneaking suspicion that this might finally be the year when the 2 Austin games come during the Rodeo road trip, which is how they should have been used all along. Like, that was the dream of the Austin games, right? So you don't have all those Rodeo games in a row. But I think that the Spurs and UT got on the same page with the NBA. I think this could be the year, and that would be a big thing for everybody, right, Jeff? Just to break up some of that trip.
Also, the Spurs could be in play-in competition late in the season. You want to have that home game at the previously bashed Ross Bank Center.
Yeah, but I think that.
But that is going to make a huge difference, I think, in the Rodeo road trip. I think it will. I mean, if your wild harebrained conspiracy theory guess actually does come to fruition, and they play those 2 games during the Rodeo road trip, I think it will make a difference. I mean, they're not home games, but they kind of are. The Spurs are used to that arena. They're used to the setup. They'll have a big crowd there. As we've seen the last 2 years, a raucous crowd there. Like, they had some of the greatest crowds of their seasons in those buildings in the Moody Center. Mm-hmm. Not having to go like 6 straight games on the road after the All-Star break or whatever, having 2 of them be basically down the road, not even a plane trip. Like, it will make it'll be a huge factor for everyone involved in that Rodeo road trip, not the least of which is us. The reporters. So I'm all for it if your prediction holds true.
Let's just say, like, you go on a 1 week, which is typical of the NBA season. There are a lot of 1 week road trips where you play 3-4 games in a row. We go on those all the time. You do that right before the All-Star break. Then you have the All-Star break, and let's just say you play a couple of games in Austin after the break, and then go on another normal sized trip right after that. That's not unlike what most teams go through. I think that'd be a cool thing.
So you think they're going to be the first 2 games right after the All-Star break? You're going to be that specific I think, in your wild, just out of left field guess. You're getting that specific.
I think that would work. Anyway, that would be cool.
We'll see if you're right.
Anything else you're looking forward to seeing out of the schedule? You think they might play 41 home games and 41 road games?
Well, but one of those home games is going to be in Paris, right?
I think 2 of them will be.
Two of them. I thought they were. That was a home and away.
You're right. One home and one away will be in Paris. 2 home will be in Austin. So that leaves 38 home games at the Frost Bank Center. Can't wait. Frost Bank Center. I can't wait to get back to compare mental notes between the view from the platform, the media platform at the Frost Bank Center. Compare that view to the view at Eiffel Tower Stadium for beach volleyball. I think I'm going to be having flashbacks to that view when I get back.
But how many cow barns were in the parking lot of the Eiffel Tower Stadium?
Not as many as you would have thought. Like I expected way more cow barns at Eiffel Tower Stadium, and I was sort of disappointed that I didn't see as many as I expected.
But the day may come when the Spurs are playing in the shadow of another tower.
Oh, look at Tom go. Look at that.
Lots of good reporting on that in the San Antonio Express News on expressnews.com. We can get into that in a future podcast episode about the eventual move of the Spurs downtown, the possible move downtown. That's years away. Our next podcast is a couple of weeks away. Thank you all for listening as usual. Until we see you next time, take care of each other and keep it real.